Internet? My name is Ryan Ingram, and over the past few weeks, I've had several people reach out to me asking me for book recommendations. Now, reading is something that I take extraordinarily seriously. I really enjoy it, and I think it's truly one of the most important things you could possibly do in order to unlock the best version of yourself and live the best of all possible lives that you can. A lot of you are already familiar with my story, but reading changed my life. 3 years ago, I was in law enforcement, and I just wasn't happy with the way things were going for me, and I couldn't provide for my family the way that I wanted to. So the action that I kind of dedicated myself to was reading one book per day until I could figure out how to solve that problem. Now, during that time, I tried to keep a really detailed log of all of the books that I read and when I read them. Unfortunately, I think I only got about 60 or 70% of them done. Sometimes I thought it was a phenomenal idea. Other times I thought I was just wasting my time. Anyway, the link to that spreadsheet is in the description. I highly recommend that you check it out. I kind of created it as a way to show people that if you read all of these books, then you would essentially know everything it is that I know, and you would be able to achieve all of the things that I've done. Now, I think that this is duplicable. I think anybody can take control of their lives by reading. Now, when I first got the idea for this book, the reason that I thought that it was important is, Mark Zuckerberg, Warren Buffett, a lot of people that are extraordinarily successful have came out and said that reading is one of the things that they take very seriously, and they carve out large chunks of their day in order to just read. So at the time when I first started reading, what I really wanted to know is, well, what are you reading? I get that reading is important. I've dedicated myself to that, but I just didn't know what to read. So I thought it would be an awesome idea to keep track of what I read when I read it. But again, I'm human. I sometimes forget to add books to that list. And there are a lot of times that I just went into the library, picked books off of a shelf, read through most of them, and then completely forgot to even really pay attention to what those books were. But that's okay because it wasn't impactful. All of the impactful books that I read, I tried to purchase copies of. So all of the books that were very impactful to me, I purchased hard copies of them and annotated the month and year that I read them. And, I do my best to read and consume books in whatever way is available to me. So I read Audible, which a link to the description is below, where you can get 2 free audiobooks if you click that link, if that's something you're interested in. And I also read books on the Kindle, and then there's an app called Hoopla where you can just rent digital copies of books from your local library. So those are all of the things that I have done and all of the ways that I consume books. So when I released this list a few days ago, I realized that it was very overwhelming to a lot of people, and they really just wanted to know like the top 10 books that they should start with, which finally leads us to the video that I'm recording today, which is the top 10 books that not only should you read, but I think you should reread these books on an annual basis. Now, as I work through this list, you're going to see that they all have a very common theme. It is mainly mindset and where you should focus your attention. So I think that's extraordinarily important. And one of the resounding, just kind of overarching quotes that always goes through my head is by Emerson, and it is, "A man is what he thinks about all day." So a lot of the reason that I think all of these books are incredibly important is especially with the media, living in the information age, you are just bombarded with information all day long. And if you don't guard up or kind of build a fortress around your own thoughts, then eventually you're going to lose control of what it is that you think and do on a daily basis. So if you are setting out to reach a goal, if you're setting out to be successful, then you really have to make sure that the majority of what you think about all day is different ways that you can improve, become more successful, become a better human for your family and your community. Speaking of being a better human, the first book that I recommend that you reread on an annual basis is Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. The title of this book really opens itself up for misinterpretation, but what this book is really about is becoming the best person internally so that you can communicate effectively with other people in a manner that makes them feel loved, important, and ultimately not having the impression that you are a giant jerk and nobody wants to talk to you. Because If you want to be successful, then relationships are really where the majority is made. You can work as hard as you want to. You can have all of the right ideas, but if you are a unfun person to communicate to or talk with, then you're probably not going to be as successful as you could be, because ultimately relationships are key. Without the help of others, you're never going to be able to get to where you want to go. The second book that you should reread on an annual basis is The Magic of Thinking Big. The magic of thinking big is really important because, yes, hard work is super important, but that's kind of the price of admission, right? So once you dedicate yourself to working hard, to being successful, then now it's a matter of how can you best utilize all of the energy that you're putting forth into the world. So it will take the same amount of energy to accomplish this one small thing as it may take to accomplish a much larger thing. It's kind of like uh, sort of similar to the 10x rule that Grant Cardone promotes. Because ultimately, you have one life, and whether you are thinking extraordinarily small or as large as you possibly can, there's no downside to striving more to achieve more. And it might be a little bit easier. But nonetheless, add that book to your list and reread it on an annual basis. Now, number 3 is an absolute classic, which is Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich. Now, Think and Grow Rich, again, that title could be a little bit off-putting to some, but ultimately this book is about becoming the type of person that success is attracted to. So it's not money focused. It is not about how to get the most money possible. It's not how to be greedy. It's not how to be a horrible person. It's actually about how to be a phenomenal human and how to achieve and be successful regardless of the obstacles or adversity that you face. This is a phenomenal mindset book, and it is one that you should, if possible, reread even more often than annually, because this is kind of the foundation, the backbone of how people that do not come from wealth achieve wealth. And as we know by one of the surveys that Dave Ramsey put out, 79% of millionaires are not born into wealth. So what that means is the majority of people that have made themselves extraordinarily wealthy have a lot of bad habits or learned behaviors that you have to unlearn in order to launch yourself forward. And this book is a phenomenal catalyst to do exactly that. Now, the fourth book is The Atomic Habits by James Clear. This book is extraordinary. I highly recommend that you read it. James Clear is a very young man that got hit really hard in the head with a baseball bat and really had to fight for his life. I think that he was told he would never walk again. I'm not sure about that fact. But nonetheless, as he was fighting for his life, he truly started understanding the importance of discipline, consistency, and he really learned how to play mind tricks with himself to achieve and actually execute all of the things that he wanted to on a daily basis. This book is extraordinarily powerful, and it will help you become the disciplined, consistent person that you need to be in order to be successful. The fifth book that I recommend that you reread on an annual basis is Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. Now, I know this is a little bit of a controversial title, but nonetheless, the principles that he puts forth in these books are extraordinarily important. And going back to Think and Grow Rich, if you consider the fact that 79% of millionaires did not inherit their wealth, then there are a lot of bad habits or just blue-collar mindsets, learned thoughts that you have to unlearn and work through in order to unlock the best version of yourself. And I don't know who can explain those things much better than Robert Kiyosaki. The sixth book is by Gary Keller, and it is The One Thing. A lot of times, once you start seeing success in a few avenues of your life, and once other people start seeing that you're going to be extraordinarily successful, a lot of people kind of try to latch onto you and kind of ride on your coattails. And you, inside your head, are probably the worst person for that, because you also try to ride your coattails and say, well, if I could be successful in this, then I can also be successful in this things. And the more things that you add to your list, the less successful you're going to be. And the more important it is that you focus on one thing, because nothing defeats success more than being spread too thin or watering down your energy to a point where you do a lot of things all day, but it doesn't make that big of an impact because your energy is spread across so many different areas. Now, there was a period of my life recently. This is a smaller book. You can read it pretty fast. You can also listen to it really quickly. And this is one of the books that I reread for an entire month. Each day I would read the entire book. I know that sounds excessive, but so desperately did I want to defeat that person inside of my head, where I wanted to focus on everything and be successful in so many different areas. So focusing in, dialing in is one of the most important things that you could possibly do. And, Gary Keller is phenomenal at walking you through all of the things that you should do in order to be able to focus in on that one thing. Now, the seventh book is by Brendon Burchard, who is the modern day king of being a high performing person or being a phenomenal success coach. He has tons of programs, tons of courses. I don't know anything about those things, but I did read his book, High Performance Habits, and that was a game changer for me. And what's really cool about Brendon is, because of his status as a success coach, he has a lot of stories of current celebrities and successful people that he can actually portray inside of that book. So you get kind of an insight onto what current successful people struggle with and how they're going about defeating those things, overcoming those things. And then he talks about just overall, from all of the people that he works with, what are the main habits that they exude that are the reason they are successful. The eighth book is a very quick read. You could probably get it done in not even a full day, maybe 1/4 of a day. And that is The Richest Man in Babylon. Now, this book is not an ancient manuscript. This isn't really old. This did not happen in the time period that it's written about. So as you start reading this, and then you're like, wow, I can't believe even all of these things were true back then too. That might be the case, but nonetheless, I just want to go ahead and preface the fact that George Clason wrote this in the 19th century, a little over 100 years ago, I think, and, not actually ancient Egyptian times. But nonetheless, it's a phenomenal read, which you should reread as much as possible. Now, the ninth book that I would highly recommend is Influence by Robert Cialdini. He is currently a professor at Arizona State University. He is one of the marketing people behind Hillary Clinton's campaign. The book is really serious. It really gives you a phenomenal insight into how the media messes with people's brains. As humans, we have certain programming that allows us to be influenced in a particular way if somebody lays down the appropriate groundwork. So, as much as you like to think you're an independent, free thinking person, all of the things that are being beaten into us on a daily basis from the media, from commercials, all of that, they have a very particular way at structuring their message so that they can get you to become a believer of them. Now, this can be abused. People can take advantage of your programming, and they can convince you to do things that otherwise you probably wouldn't. But nonetheless, you can also use these same tools, tips, tricks, whatever you want to call them, for good, and convince people to bring out the best version of themselves, which is kind of one of the things that I'm encouraging you to do by rereading all of these books on an annual basis. That way you have more control over all of the things it is that you think about all day. And then if you are constantly putting all of these books into your head, then the ability for other people to speak inside of that becomes a much smaller percentage of your overall brain capacity. So this is a book that you should reread on a regular basis so that you can remind yourself of all of the things that people attempt to do to kind of get a little bit more control over you, or get you to go to either one side or another. This is not a political book, even though he was on Hillary Clinton's campaign. He has just put in his full lifetime's worth of work into figuring out how humans click and how you can, I don't want to say manipulate that, but how you can work with people to get your message across most effectively. Now, the 10th book is a favorite of mine. I have recommended it to several people recently, and one lady said that it actually changed her life. It led her through so many breakthroughs that her life from here on out will not look the same under any circumstances, and that is The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. The Big Leap is really separated into two parts. The first is all of the ways that you are problematic to yourself, all of the limitations, all of the lies that you impose on yourself. And then the second is all about how to operate consistently and most often in your zone of genius. So it helps you walk through like what you're best at, because every single person in the world has something that they have the ability to be the best at. If you've read Jim Collins' Good to Great, it's essentially the hedgehog concept. So what's profitable, what are you passionate about, and there's one other thing that comprises that I can't think of right now because I'm in front of camera and I'm suffering from stage fright. And because reading is so important to me, and now that I have talked about all of these books, there's one more that I'm going to add to your list that you need to reread on an annual basis that is super important. And if you know somebody that is not living up to their potential, then I would highly recommend that you start with this book. Now, this book was written by a professor. Her name is Carol Dweck, and it is a mandatory read in a lot of educational programs. Now, if our educational system actually read this book and acted on the things that it talks about, then I think our school system would look drastically different. But this book hasn't been actualized on a national basis. However, the best of teachers are probably familiar with this book, and that is Mindset by Carol Dweck. Now, there are a lot of common themes in this book. Mindset is kind of reiterated or an extension of or part of the contents of The Big Leap, Think and Grow Rich, Atomic Habits, The One Thing. Technically, all of these books probably learned a thing or two about mindset from Carol Dweck, or Carol Dweck does a really good job at summarizing all of these. I don't know the publication dates, but there's the growth mindset that Carol Dweck talks about it's okay if you don't know something or if you're not particularly good at something. But if you put in the work and the effort, you have the ability to improve that. And, I'm of the school of thought that you can actually improve your IQ. You're not born with a certain IQ that you're never going to overcome. You have the ability to study, to learn, to take action, to gain experience. And ultimately, in all of that, you're going to become more refined. You're going to be a better performer, and you are going to just really excel and be successful because you're tapping into that growth mindset, which says there's always room for improvement if you have the ability and patience to be disciplined, consistent, and put in the work. So thanks so much. Those are my 10, now 11 recommendations of books that I think you should reread on an annual basis. Down in the description below, I've included a link to all of the books that I have read that I've actually remembered to add to the spreadsheet. So please check those out. And yes, they contain affiliate links where if you purchase a book from this list, I will get a small commission if you use the link in the spreadsheet. Thanks so much. If you guys have any questions, points of clarifications, or want to talk about any other books, or have any book recommendations for me that aren't on the list, please let me know. I'm constantly looking for new good books to read or reread. Thanks so much. Can't wait to talk to you guys soon.